Okay, hello and welcome back. This is Stephen Ball at Delphi Ball, and in this video we are going to be looking at building on from the previous video. So if you haven't seen that, I recommend going and watching that first. But we're going to be building on our master detail data with RAD Server using the TEMSDataset resource and also the documentation that we can do through attributes to automatically generate the YAML documentation that we can then use through Swagger UI and other YAML import tools. So let's have a quick review of what we did last time. So last time we looked at downloading Swagger UI. We then got that working inside RAD Server by being able to go to our RAD Server instance /Swagger-UI, which got around a lot of the cross-resource sharing issues that you'd normally have with something being outside from a resource point of view. And then we then made it very easy to consume that using the API documentation that we did. We looked at web files in RAD Server as the way to get the distribution path for Swagger UI after downloading that accessible. And we also looked at using the resource suffix parameters, attributes instead, to make sure that we can then name the parameters that we're passing in to the API calls. Now that set us in good stead that we've been able to call and get a list of the exams, which is our listed data table, and then a specific exam by ID. Now moving on from that, this time we're actually going to look at building onto master detail relationships and even master detail, just the way that this data is set up. And we're also then going to have a look at an advanced option where we can actually roll the detail with its detail into one by hand coding a little bit of JSON using some of the classes and properties that are available very easily to us through RAD Server. So without further ado, let's get in to have a look at the detail. Okay, so last time we have our resource here, which is exams, and our one query, and then the exported element of it, which we have here. So now we're going to build on from this and we're going to create some detail relationships in. So first let's have a quick look at the data underneath. So here's our data. We can see we have exams which have got an exam ID. The exams all have a set of questions. So the questions, each question has its own ID with an exam ID referencing back to the parent, how many points the question is worth, and what the actual question copy is. And then each question then has a set of answers, so each answer has its own ID which references back to a parent. So we can see here there's two possible answers for question ID 29, and that's either true or false, and the correct answer is true and the wrong answer is false. And we can see here that for question number 32, true or false, the actual answer you want to say is false, and there's a sequence that those answers are put in. So this is the kind of the basic data structure. What we're going to do now is actually just build that into our data module here on the server. So I can use the Data Explorer here very quickly just to go to the connection I've already added in to the tables, and let's add in the exam questions and the exam answers. Now these are just a basic query fetching the data back. So what we're going to do here, I'm just going to slightly rename this just from my OCD point of view. So let's change the name here to query questions, and this one here just to query answers. Now what we need to do is we need to actually make sure that we get the master data relationships in. So the first thing we need to do is just use a data source which we're going to connect to the query exam, and that's going to give us our current exam. So let's just say DS exam, and in here we just need to say where exam ID equals, and then put in a parameter using the full colon. So that still allows us to execute, and we need to now set up that our master source is the query exam, the master field is the exam ID, and that should now connect up nicely. And we need to do the same kind of thing. Let's put another data source down here that will connect up to query questions, and let's call this data source questions, and that's going to provide into the answers. So this is going to pass in the question ID, and the question ID is then going to provide the answers. So again, we need to just update the table here where question ID equals question ID. Okay, so that's executing, it's fine. Now we need to expose these, so we just need another TMS data set resource. I'm literally just going to go copy and paste down here. Let's move you over here. And just update this to be pointing to the questions. And let's put another one in here, which is pointing to the answers. And again, I'm just going to rename these. So dataset resource questions and dataset resource answers. Okay, so let's go and have a quick look underneath. So here we can see that we have our original query that was exposed, and we can also now see that we've got these two additional resources at the bottom here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy to start with just these bottom set of attributes and place them above each one of these. So the first one here is our questions. So we need to update the resource suffix, so where we're delegating the URL to. So we know we're going to be taking an exam ID in here because that's already been defined above. And then this is to get a set of questions, so we're going to call this questions. And then we are going to set this up here to be a question ID that is passed in. So you don't need to actually list the full path onto each one here. The first one here defines the base URL in essence, and the list will be /questions, and then a get will be a specific question ID, a put, and delete, so on. Okay, and so let's just expand this a little bit further. So we're going to have here now a question ID, and then we're going to have an answer ID for the other properties. Okay, so that's relatively straightforward. The only thing that we do need to make sure that we do know, and we haven't done yet, is just to make sure that we've got the key fields assigned onto these. So up on here, you can see there's a property called key fields. So we need to actually now define in here the key field. Here is the exam ID, and the key fields here should be the question and the answer, because we're going to need both. Okay, so let's just double check our setup before we run. So we've got our base exams, we've got our exam questions, and then our exam questions. Oh, we need to put answers in here as well. Answers. So we now have a defined name. If we hadn't put answers in there, then we'd be actually matching a URL segment here. We'd actually get an error. In fact, I'll take that out. We can just see that because it's quite useful to see that sometimes. So here's our exams, and let's check our exams. Let's have a look at 863, and let's have a look at the questions. There's the questions for 863. We can see the exam ID is copying through here. And now let's have a look at question 870. And that's when we're getting the error, because we haven't got the answers bit defined. Okay, so let's go back into here and just put answers. Let's just save and rerun. And where we had an error before, we're now getting the answer come up. Now it is important that you put the trailing slash in to actually define a list of the items. Otherwise it's trying to pass a parameter in, which then is confusing to it. So you do need to make sure you put the / at the end. Okay. So that's pretty good. What we can do here is we can see that we've got a list of all of our details. We can actually do here now question mark sort on, so we do the SF and let's just put down question ID, and we can do that descending. So we can now see that we've got the question ID in descending order. So this is all built in, and our paging is the other option that we could do. Again, I haven't actually set the paging up to be anything smaller than 50, and I've got less than 50 records returning. So we can set a page size here. Let's go for questions, and let's set that to 1. Oh, so 10, and let's go ahead and run that. So exams on questions. Now this is going to return all questions because we haven't actually defined a page. But if we do question mark page 1, we can see we've got much less returned here. And if we set this to page 2, we can now see that we're starting at record 60, and we can just keep going all the way through as the pages go up. But if we do something that's going to be out of range, so like page 99, we'll just get an empty array. So all that functionality with the sorting is all built in. That's all part of the EMS data set resource. And there we are, we've got master detail relationship. Now, what I'd like to do is now just jump back to Swagger and go and have a look and see what's coming up in our Swagger UI. So I'm just going to go back here and let's open up a new browser and just jump back to our Swagger UI. So again, I'm just calling the remote resource here. I could be calling it directly on the machine. So there we are now onto our Swagger UI. We can go down, we can find our exam section. Now we can see that the original one's been documented as being under exams. With the other ones we haven't put any of the additional summary information on yet. So they're all showing as default, and we have a look, we can see that there's no parameters or anything set up and defined yet, so we just need to go back and set up the key fields that we're passing through to make that work completely. So again, we can just go and copy and paste in from the top and just modify the options. So I'll just do that quickly and then revert back through. Okay, so just to have saved a bit of time there, let's just move those out of the way. I've just done some duplication and added in additional parameters as needed. So we can see now that we've got exams section being defined, the exam questions and the exam question answers, a bit of documentation about what they each do. Again, we're saying redefining what the parameters that are being passed in here. So we've got an exam ID, the question ID, and then also where the answer ID is, and that is an optional item, and what it is coming through. So let's just check to make sure I updated these. These are true now to be required because they're part of the base resource suffix. Whereas the last one is optional because it's only used on the gets, puts and deletes. Okay, so let's go ahead and close RAD Server and restart it. And let's pull back our Swagger UI. And we can now see that under exams we've got a whole load of things set out. So if we want to go and test this one here, try it out, an exam ID is required, so let's go for exam 1. And we can see that we're getting stuff back, which is great. Very cool. Now the last thing that I want to cover through is what we can do if we need to actually expand a little bit more detail with an existing data set that's being passed in. So at the moment we're passing the list of the exams, then the questions, and then the answers. But what would be quite good is to actually be able to combine the answers as detail for each of the records that's passed back as we pass back the questions for the exam. So the way to do that is to actually roll our own get method, which we can make available. So I'm just going to copy that on my notepad that I've got on my other screen here and paste that in here. So here I'm just going to create a new exam ID resource suffix with questions full. So this is going to take from the base exams and then have an exam ID and then questions full. So that's just our name for it. And here you can see we name it up again. We're using the request summary that's part of the exams family of endpoints. It's an exams, questions and answers, and it requires an exam ID. And we can also define here specific request details, so a 200 being okay. We can define 404, we can define a whole load of different things if we want to. But we're going to put this as a procedure get, setting in the context, the request, and then the response. So let's just code complete there. And then all we need to do is to actually kind of define in the details of what we want to do. So just to save again a little bit of time, I've just got one which I'm going to copy paste in, and then we can kind of go over the details of that. Okay, so I need to just do a little refactoring here just to update the parameter names to be the same as what we've got already. So this is query questions and then query exam answers. There we are. Okay, so basically what we're doing here is we're just getting, we're converting a record to a JSON object, passing in the data set, and we're ignoring a master field here, just because we don't want to push it back. It's already in the detail above it. So we get the exam ID as an item, and we then try to open up the exam ID, and if it fails, then we raise an invalid exam ID, and we just use the raised not found default method here. We can then write using the JSON writer that's part of the response body, and we can then just build our JSON array. So we can start the array, we can then loop through the questions, and while we're not at the end of the questions, we can then write the question out, start the object, put the object in, and then add the property for the answers, which is an array, and then loop through the answers. And because it's using the master detail configuration that's already on the data module, we don't need to do anything else apart from just navigate through the data set and write the appropriate begin and end objects and arrays. And that is literally it. That's all we need to do. So let's go ahead and run that now. So we can go and have a look at exams 1 answers full. Again, we need to just make sure that we put the / on. So answers full or answer full. Questions full. There we are. And now we can see that we've got our dataset being passed back with our detail embedded inside. So here we can call one RESTful API call and get the full dataset back. And if we go back and just check the other exams, 863 was another one. 863. That's great. Now if we go to exam 2, which doesn't exist, we just get an empty array back. So that's all good. And a very, very simple way to roll a specific get out based on requirements that we have. And that will dramatically reduce the amount of API calls that have to be made, although it's a slightly bigger payload. But that is obviously kind of a trade-off that you can make, and it's quite easy to then define what you want to do with specific ones. So that really brings us to the end of this session, fetching master detailed data with RAD Server and the TMS dataset resource. We've had a look at getting specifically named parameters into the URL, having the master with the detail with the exams, questions and the answers, and also rolling our own specific master with embedded detail, or detail with embedded detail at the end there. So look forward to hearing how you guys get on. Happy coding and see you again soon.